this story, the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, together with the UN independent expert on albinism, has just released a new guiding note aimed at helping African governments better report and respond to the challenges facing children living with albinism. To discuss its significance, we're joined by Muluka-Anne Miti-Drummond, the UN independent expert on the enjoyment of human rights by persons living with albinism. Muluka-Anne, thank you for joining us. Good morning. Muluka-Anne, are you there?
Apologies, I'm muted.
Oh,
Good
okay.
morning. Thank you for having me.
It is our pleasure. So, what prompted, first of all, the development of this guiding note, and what key gaps is it trying to address?
So, what prompted the development is that children with albinism are children who are highly vulnerable within the continent, but they are rarely considered and their rights are rarely considered. So, they're vulnerable, firstly, because of superstitions that believe that the body parts of persons with albinism, if used in ritual practices, can provide some kind of wealth or good fortune. And so, unfortunately, persons with albinism are often targeted, abducted, may have their body parts cut off, mutilated, and even killed by people who believe that using their body parts can give them good luck. And unfortunately, children are the most impacted by this. The children are the ones who are disproportionately impacted. So that's one reason why they're highly vulnerable. There have been a number of attacks against children and adults sometimes, but children predominantly in different African countries. They are also vulnerable because they're actually children with disabilities, and people don't always recognize that they have disability, that albinism is actually a disability. And it's a disability for two reasons. First of all, because of visual impairment. So, albinism is always accompanied by low visual acuity. And even if children with albinism, people with albinism wear glasses, that doesn't mean that they can see 100%. The glasses can help, but it would not necessarily improve 100% the vision. They also have nystagmus, which is the rapid eye movement from side to side, and photophobia, sensitivity to the sun. But they're also considered persons with albinism, with disabilities, because they're very vulnerable, susceptible to the sun. So the lack of melanin means that children and people with albinism are more likely to get burnt in the sun and are more likely to get skin cancer. And therefore, because of the visual impairment and the vulnerability to skin cancer and skin damage from the sun, states are required to take specific measures to help them learn in class, help them participate in society. If they're adults, help them with work and get workplaces. But as I've mentioned, children are highly vulnerable because of the attacks and the disability, but they're often overlooked. So the African Committee requires states to report on a regular basis on what they're doing to protect children, all children, not just children with albinism. Unfortunately, states rarely report on what they're doing to protect children with albinism. They may report on what's being done to protect children with disabilities. They may report on what's being done to protect other vulnerable children, but children with albinism often get ignored. And the only time when children with albinism are mentioned in these reports is in countries where there are known attacks against children with albinism. But what this guiding note is saying is that states should be talking about what they're doing to protect and to protect the rights of all children with albinism in all countries, not just where there are attacks, but what are states doing, for example, in relation to education? How are you supporting children with albinism to make sure that they're getting a good education? And because of the visual impairment, children with albinism will need measures such as large print textbooks. They will need measures such as high contrast. By high contrast, we mean like, bright writing on a dark background, or, light write, just that kind of thing. And they also need things like magnifying glasses, glass spectacles to wear. And also, of course, children with albinism need protection for their skin. So what are states doing? Are you providing sunscreen? Are you providing regular skin cancer screening for the children with albinism? So that's what the guiding note is saying, basically, just to remind states that you have a responsibility to protect children with albinism. All African states have children with albinism, and we want to know what you're doing to protect those children with albinism, not just against attacks, but protecting their health, and also ensuring they get a great education, and also ensuring that they get to live with their families, because sometimes children with albinism end up in boarding schools or end up separated from their families because of the attacks. So that's, in a nutshell, what the guiding note is actually asking for and what motivated it.
All right, so some specific indicators then for states to report on this issue the
Exactly.
note provides. It also is a collaborative effort between the UN and the African Union. So how important is that collaboration, that regional international partnership in tackling the rights and the challenges of these children living with albinism?
So the collaboration was very essential, and I'm very grateful to the African Committee of Experts on, agreeing to work with me and also initiating it. I'd like to mention specifically Honorable Abubakri and Honorable Ava from the African Committee who championed this and worked with me. And it's essential because at the UN level, the global level, we have a person responsible for the rights of persons with albinism, that person being me, the UN independent expert. But at the African level, we still do not have any individual who's looking specifically at the rights of persons with albinism. There has been a suggestion, and I think it's underway to adopt an AU envoy on the rights of persons with albinism. We're still waiting for this special envoy to be appointed. Now, the reason why this is essential for us to do the collaboration, therefore, is because children in Africa, children with albinism in Africa, are even more impacted than children with albinism in other countries because the attacks only happen in Africa. So, in order to ensure that we are putting more focus on children with albinism in Africa, this collaboration was essential. So, it helped me bring the knowledge and the skills and the expertise that I had to the regional level, and help me collaborate with the regional level that has more expertise on the specific needs of children within the continent. So what we need to make sure is that whenever we're dealing with this issue, we're dealing with it in the context in which it happens. And so it was essential for me to collaborate with the African Committee because they are the experts on children with all children in Africa and the rights of children in Africa. And so our expertise helped us come up with this guiding note that made sure that children with albinism are not being neglected and are also being protected.
Civil society groups and national human rights institutions are also mentioned as key partners. So, how can they use this guiding note to strengthen advocacy and accountability on this topic?
Definitely, they're essential partners. As I've said, they also work a lot on the rights of children, all children. But unfortunately, a lot of them are actually unaware of the specific needs of children with albinism. A lot are unaware that children with albinism are children with disabilities. Some may be aware of the attacks, but they're not aware of the educational needs, the health needs. So it's essential that they become more aware of that. But also, they can use this guiding note to hold their governments accountable. So if the government is, reporting on what is being done for children, civil society can look at this guiding notes and actually ask the specific questions that are in the guiding note and state that there is a lack of data, because that's the problem. Like most of the time, we do not have any data that specifically looks at children with albinism. How many children with albinism are in school? What is the dropout rate for children with albinism? What are the reasons for the dropout rate? What is the rate of cancer among children with albinism? All the statistics is not available, and CSOs would need these statistics, and they can use these guiding notes to hold government accountable. And once the statistics are available, what we also need to see is an improvement. So the first time you report, you'll have certain levels, but this has to be done regularly, and so we need to see the improvement after some time. And civil society can use these indicators to hold government accountable, and to request and demand these measures to be taken and to be put in place, like places where there's no skin cancer screening for children, where there's no sunscreen available for children with albinism. CSOs can push for that and show how this is an obligation of the states to provide these measures.
So, how do we have then monitoring and follow up measures in place to ensure that the guidelines are adhered to by states and they don't just remain on paper for African governments to take action?
Definitely. So CSOs need to push for that as well. So first of all is when it's time for the government to report to the African Committee. CSOs can also provide parallel reports where they provide the information that they have. And they can also get in contact with the African Committee through these parallel reports and request further information from the African Committee. So the CSOs and the National Human Rights Institute can actually highlight that, yes, the state has done a very good reported on all the situations of children. However, you have not mentioned children with albinism. Can you please mention children with albinism? And even before the state submits their reports, CSOs can approach the governments and highlight these guiding notes and say to them, in your report that you're submitting, please do not forget children with albinism. It's essential that we also mention the children with albinism. So what we need from CSOs, from NHRIs, and I'm very grateful to SABC Channel Africa for giving me this opportunity, is to highlight these guiding notes, because I think sometimes it's not that states don't want to report. Sometimes they actually don't understand the situation and don't know what they need to report. So these guiding notes are essential because they provide that awareness raising, and then an opportunity for governments to then fill in the gaps, fill in the missing data. So I'm very grateful for SABC Channel Africa for providing this opportunity, and I'm hoping CSOs are listening, NHRIs are listening, and authorities are listening and will actually use these guiding notes and implement what is in them.
Muluka-Anne, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's where we end that conversation. And that was Muluka-Anne Miti-Drummond, the UN independent expert on the enjoyment of human rights by persons living with albinism, speaking to us about the new guiding note on reporting on the rights and welfare of children living with albinism in Africa.